Spinning out before the race, like that was 1,000% just to get on TV.
Kyle Larson has been asked about Carson Hocevar twice this year, and his answer changed dramatically between the two. In June 2026, he called the 23-year-old phenomenal and predicted he would win a lot of races. In August 2026, he accused him of faking a spin for television. Something happened in the weeks between those two interviews, and Kyle Larson named it on a podcast without waiting for anyone to ask. If you follow racing, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment telling us who you think deserved that win. The accusation is direct. Kyle Larson believes Carson Hocevar spun his car out on purpose at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and that he did it before the race had officially started for the sole purpose of appearing on television. Kyle Larson made the claim while appearing as a guest on the Door Bumper Clear podcast, which is produced by Dirty Mo Media. The words he used left no space for interpretation. "I mean, spinning out before the race, that was 1,000% just to get on TV," Kyle Larson said. That is the part which separates this from every other spin in a NASCAR Cup Series season. This was not contact in a corner. This was not a last lap battle for position. There was no green flag, no competition, and no other car close enough to be involved. Carson Hocevar lost control of his car while the entire field was still rolling behind the pace car. To understand the accusation, the conditions have to be understood first. The race was the Dollar Tree 301 run in the NASCAR Cup Series at New Hampshire Motor Speedway on Sunday, August 23, 2026. Officials had already made one significant change before anybody arrived at the racetrack. The green flag was moved up by 1 hour from the originally scheduled start time of 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time, in an effort to get the race running before the incoming weather arrived. The weather moved up by an hour as well. Rain reached the racetrack before the cars did, and the surface was left extremely wet as the field circled for the pace lap. NASCAR responded by putting the entire field on wet weather tires, which are built specifically for a damp surface and allow racing to continue on shorter tracks when a dry tire would be useless. There is a limit to what those tires can do. The surface has to be wet, not flooded. That is why the pace laps mattered so much that afternoon. The drivers were not simply circulating and waiting. They were using those laps to gauge how much grip was actually available, and their feedback was what NASCAR needed before the officials could throw the green flag in front of 36 NASCAR Cup Series cars. The field did not agree, such Joey Logano and his Team Penske group had already made their position known, declaring themselves Team Thumbs Down on whether the race should get underway at all. Carson Hocevar took the opposite view. He was Team Thumbs Up. He was willing to find out exactly how slippery the racetrack really was. He found out in front of everybody. Carson Hocevar, the driver of the pink number 77 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet, accelerated past the pace car to test the level of grip available to him. The car stepped out underneath him and he spun in turn 4. The green flag had not been shown. The field was still in single file behind the pace car. The most controlled lap of the entire day produced the first spin of the entire day. Over his own radio, Carson Hocevar reported what he had learned without any panic in his voice. "It's a little slick off 4, he said. Joey Logano, who started the race from 21st position, had a front row view of the whole sequence. He was pacing nearby as the number 77 went around, and his radio call became the most repeated audio of the weekend. "Look at this guy, look at this idiot," Joey Logano said. He was not the only driver reacting. Onboard footage from the spin captured other voices on the radio as cars passed the stranded Chevrolet. One driver asked, "The hell is he doing?" Another delivered a more calculated response aimed at what the spin would mean for the group that wanted to race. "Well, that doesn't help our case," that driver said. The consequence was immediate. NASCAR brought the entire field back down to pit road and delayed the start of the race again. One car, spinning by itself at slow speed with no contact involved, stopped the process that the sanctioning body had been trying to complete for hours. Carson Hocevar did not wait for anybody else to frame the story. He went to social media almost immediately and defended his own decision in a post on X, which he then deleted shortly after sending it. "I much rather test the track when no one's around versus green flag and people around. If no one else was going to test it, I'll do it LOL," he wrote. The reasoning inside that message holds up on its own terms. It is better for a driver to establish that a racetrack is too wet while the field is running at pace car speed than to discover the same information at racing speed with cars packed together on the opening lap. A spin behind the pace car costs a delay. The same spin after the green flag costs cars, and possibly a great deal more. The counterweight is the deletion. Carson Hocevar made his argument publicly, then removed the argument himself within a short period of time. The spin stayed on television. The explanation did not stay on his account. Kyle Larson did not arrive at his accusation through the spin alone. On Door Bumper Clear, the conversation started somewhere else entirely. It started with the question of whether the personality that made Carson Hocevar one of the most recognizable drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series has stopped being genuine and has turned into something performed. I don't think you have to totally neuter him, but I almost feel like he's at the point now where he's like doing it even, like it's not really him, it's a piece of him, but he's going above what he really is. Kyle Larson. Spotter Brett Griffin agreed with that reading and pushed it further. "It's like he's playing a game out there. He's doing it for attention, clicks, or views," Brett Griffin said. Then Brett Griffin made a point that worked against his own show. He acknowledged that the podcast discusses Carson Hocevar every single week and that the coverage is a direct result of the behavior they were criticizing. "He leaves us no choice because he does a lot of dumb stuff all the time," Brett Griffin said. That is the mechanism the whole conversation kept circling. The people calling it a stunt were at that exact moment giving the stunt an audience. And it was inside that discussion that Kyle Larson delivered the line that traveled across the sport. Him spinning out before the race, that was 1,000% just to get on TV, Kyle Larson said. From there, Kyle Larson moved from personality to on-track conduct, and the second half of his criticism is heavier than the first. He described a driver who, in his view, loses control of his own decision-making once a race begins. "I don't think people are telling him, 'Hey, go door everybody.' I think he just blacks out," Kyle Larson said. He then brought up an incident at Iowa Speedway that the television broadcast never showed. Kyle Larson says he was running directly behind Carson Hocevar and watched the whole thing develop over multiple laps. The camera didn't catch it at Iowa, but he was trying to spear Bell when he got lapped for like the second time. He was trying to spear Christopher Bell for 2 laps. "I'm behind him like, 'What are you doing?' Kyle Larson said, and the details give that claim its weight. Carson Hocevar was a lapped car at that point in the race, which meant he had nothing to gain on the racetrack. Christopher Bell was in the playoff fight, which meant he had a great deal to lose, and Kyle Larson was positioned behind both of them, watching it happen from the closest possible vantage point available to any driver in the field. Kyle Larson then summarized what he says is a repeating pattern rather than a single incident. "That's what I don't understand. You admit that you wrecked yourself, but then you still go out and run right through him the next chance you get," Kyle Larson said. That description matches what happened later in the same New Hampshire race. Carson Hocevar attempted to cover the bottom lane before he had completed a pass on Connor Zilisch, moved across the front of the other car and spun himself. He accepted responsibility for turning himself around. He then made contact with Connor Zilisch again afterward on the same afternoon in the same race. Admit the mistake, then repeat the mistake. That is the loop Kyle Larson described. And New Hampshire Motor Speedway produced a live example of it within a single event. Brett Griffin closed that section of the conversation with the phrase that fits the situation most precisely. "He is Mr. Excitement, for better or worse. He's going to find himself on TV every week somehow," Brett Griffin said. None of this means Kyle Larson doubts the ability of the driver he is criticizing. His comments from earlier in the year make that clear. Speaking on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast in June 2026, hosted by former National Football League teammates Taylor Lewan and Will Compton, Kyle Larson was asked directly for his opinion of Carson Hocevar. "Hocevar, honestly, I respect his talent. I think he's extremely good and fast. I like his aggressiveness even, but I would say it goes overboard a lot of the time," Kyle Larson said. He went further in the same interview and put a ceiling on the young driver that very few competitors receive from him. "He's phenomenal. He outruns his teammates by a lot every week. He's really good. He's going to be around for a long time, and he's going to win a lot of races, Kyle Larson said. The criticism in June 2026 was aimed at conduct away from the racetrack. Carson Hocevar streams regularly on Twitch, playing video games and interacting with racing fans, and Kyle Larson used that platform as his example. For me, he's young, but he's more immature than what his age is. I have his little Twitch stream thing pop up on my Instagram feed every now and then, and I'm like, dude, this guy is like an 8-year-old. That's where I lose a little bit of respect, because I'm like, this guy could be the future of our sport, and he's acting like he's 8 years old, Kyle Larson said. On Door Bumper Clear, prompted by Tommy Baldwin, Kyle Larson described Carson Hocevar as maybe the most talented out there. That assessment carries weight because of who is making it. Kyle Larson is a 2-time and defending NASCAR Cup Series champion with 32 career NASCAR Cup Series race victories, driving the number 5 for Hendrick Motorsports. The rest of the afternoon at New Hampshire Motor Speedway supported one part of the Carson Hocevar defense. Tyler Reddick started from the pole after posting a qualifying lap of 29.054 seconds, then spun exiting turn 4 on the opening lap once the race finally got going after the delay. That spin brought out the first caution of the race, and Denny Hamlin and Chris Buescher were both caught up behind the spinning car. Later, John Hunter Nemechek spun the number 40 Legacy Motor Club Toyota and scraped up the wall on lap 22. The surface was genuinely difficult, and several drivers learned that at speed rather than behind the pace car. Carson Hocevar himself recovered from the pre-race spin and ran competitively for the remainder of the event, finishing 19th. After the race, he posted on social media about the progress he and his team have made across 3 seasons in the NASCAR Cup Series, with the playoffs approaching. There's another side to this that never appeared in the podcast conversation. Carson Hocevar is 23 years old and in his 3rd full-time NASCAR Cup Series season with Spire Motorsports. He reached as high as 5th in the point standings earlier in the season before dropping back toward the playoff cut line. His effect on the audience is measurable. One NASCAR fan, a 27-year-old from North Carolina, wrote publicly that he had drifted away from the sport for years and that Carson Hocevar brought him back. He described buying a hat from the Carson Hocevar hauler at Martinsville and noted it was the first piece of NASCAR merchandise he had owned in over 15 years. He also wrote that he had since pre-ordered the full set of 2026 paint scheme collectibles.
That is the split. Carson Hocevar is a driver fans either follow closely or reject outright, and the responses rarely land anywhere in between.
The timing of the Kyle Larson comments matters as much as the content. They arrived heading into the final regular season race and the playoff battle, which places more attention on the number 77 rather than less. The accusation itself has now generated exactly the coverage that Kyle Larson claims the spin was designed to generate. The question remains unresolved by anything on the record. Carson Hocevar says he was testing the grip level so that nobody else would have to do it at racing speed. Kyle Larson says the spin was staged for the cameras and gave it a percentage. Now it is your turn. Do you think Carson Hocevar spun on purpose just to get on television? Subscribe if you want more NASCAR breakdowns like this every week. Comment below with the moment you think decided this race.